Jason Bourne, the ultimate secret agent, brainwashed by the CIA to create a killing machine. It sounds like Hollywood fantasy, but in fact, many aspects of the Bourne movies are grounded in reality.
People with the skill sets that Jason Bourne displays in the movies do exist, very much so.
Jason Bourne's lethal combat skills are closely based on the real-life training that covert operatives undergo. The Secret Services have run illegal black operations against its enemies without the approval of government.
This was a perfect example of the CIA conducting a wide degree of assassinations.
Bourne wouldn't be Bourne if it weren't for the fact that my father ran this investigation.
And there is evidence that the CIA conducted sinister mind control experiments to create an assassin like Bourne.
The basic components of the Bourne identity actually happened and actually were operational.
There are these portions of my life that are just completely gone.
This is the real story of the Bourne identity. June 2002, and The Bourne Identity, starring Matt Damon, is released to critical acclaim. It's the first installment in the Bourne trilogy of movies that went on to take almost $1 billion at the box office.
For an American action movie, it's very good. It's a little different, and it has some intelligence to it.
Jason Bourne is a covert CIA operative who has been brainwashed and reprogrammed by a secret CIA cell. He has been turned into a killing machine, a super assassin trained to eliminate targets with maximum efficiency. It sounds far-fetched, but elements of the movie's storyline are actually inspired by real life.
I think that the idea of suspense has always appealed to me.
Bourne was originally created by author Robert Ludlum, who had a lifelong fascination with the CIA. In fact, his knowledge of the agency was so detailed that some speculated that he was a spy himself.
Robert Ludlum often laughed about the accusations that he might well be a member of the CIA, but he did have 3 roommates from college who went into the intelligence service. One of those 3 became an inspector general of the CIA.
Ludlum was inspired by real people and events. In the Bourne trilogy, Jason Bourne's nemesis is a real-life terrorist named Carlos the Jackal. He became the world's most wanted man after carrying out a wave of killings in the 70s and 80s. But when the Bourne Identity was adapted for the big screen, there was a crucial change to the script.
They decided that Carlos the Jackal was not a significant figure that would make much significance to a modern viewer, and so they focused on the relationship between Bourne and the CIA and Treadstone, and that was a very wise decision.
The arch-villain in the movies wouldn't be a person, but an organization. Operation Treadstone is a secret CIA cell training agents like Bourne to assassinate those it deems to be America's enemies. It operates illegally and without the knowledge of government. And incredible as it seems, Treadstone was born out of a real-life black operation that shocked America and the world.
Mr. Lyman was considering a very important aspect of the investigation, the creation and the maintenance of a secret government within our government.
In 1986, a congressional investigation uncovered a secret cell inside America's National Security Agency. For 12 months, its members had covertly exported arms to America's avowed enemy, Iran, in exchange for cash and the release of U.S. hostages. The money raised had been used to back the Contras, a rebel militia fighting the democratically elected left-wing government in Nicaragua.
This was a perfect example of the CIA working with local indigenous people, military officers, conducting a wide degree of assassinations.
Bourne identity director Doug Lyman, who was 21 when the story broke, had an extraordinary personal connection to the affair.
My father ran the Iran-Contra investigation.
Do you deny, Colonel?
The kind of stuff that would normally be in a movie, but it happened in real life, and my father was actually charged by Congress to investigate.
He was shredding documents that Saturday.
I do not deny that. I remember shredding documents while they were in there reading documents.
Arthur Lyman's investigation revealed that elements within the Secret Services were prepared to break the law to pursue their own agenda. And 16 years later, Iran-Contra would give his son the template for Operation Treadstone. He even used some of its key players as inspiration for his fictional Treadstone conspirators.
Chris Cooper was playing Oliver North. Brian Cox was playing a combination of Admiral Poindexter and McFarlane. It was called The Enterprise in real life. I mean, that sounds like something made up for a movie. Like if I told you one was called Treadstone, one was called The Enterprise, which one's real life, which one's the movie, you'd have a hard time telling.
The fall guide plan was that
his father's role in the investigation also gave Lyman an incredible insight into the world of espionage.
I got to see how spies really worked in the real world. Bourne wouldn't be Bourne if it weren't for the fact that my father ran this investigation and that I had this passion for telling what I considered a real spy story.
In the movies, Jason Bourne is a highly efficient covert operative who used to be a member of elite unit Delta Force. According to experts, Bourne's abilities are actually very close to the real thing.
A lot of it is realistic. A lot of the abilities that he portrayed in the movie could be consistent with Delta or Navy SEALs. They come to us with a lot of experience. Their firearm skills, their handling is exceptional.
Elite operatives must learn proficiency with an astonishing range of weapons. Unlike soldiers, they can choose their own firearms, but must also be able to use other guns they might acquire while on a mission.
We teach them everything from the shotgun, a submachine gun, an M4, an AK-47, and then a variety of pistols. We teach them how to manipulate them, how to shoot them, how to clear stoppages, how to deal with multiple threat.
And gun skills aren't the only area of expertise that could save an operative's life in a hostile situation. Perhaps the most distinctive trademark of the Bourne movies is high-octane stunt driving. It's an essential part of the real-life operative's skill set. An in-depth knowledge of vehicle dynamics could mean the difference between life and death.
Driver training has come a long way in the last 25, 30 years. The level of sophistication in what to do with different cars, the skid capabilities of different vehicles, braking capabilities, how to maneuver around and through vehicles. In my opinion, it's quite amazing.
One skill operatives must learn is how to appropriate any vehicle they might need, according to J.J. Green, an expert with Secret Service contacts.
One of the elements of deniability is not leaving a trail. And if you need to ditch a car and get another car, being a covert operative, then you do it. A source of mine explained to me that when he received his training, hot wiring a car was a 2-minute operation.
Real-life elite operatives are also taught to use their vehicle as a weapon if they are threatened with capture.
For the driving sequences in the Bourne movie, you also have a ram maneuver, both driving forward and in reverse. You want to place your headlight up with one of the axles of the vehicle. maximum speed 15 miles per hour because of your airbags that are designed in most vehicles.
Bourne's driving and firearms proficiency are not the only skills that come straight from the training regime of real-life elite operatives. Just like Bourne, they also learn ways of killing even without weapons and undergo a training ordeal with disturbing parallels to Bourne's Treadstone experience. In the Bourne movie trilogy, Jason Bourne has lost all memory of his previous life as a CIA assassin. But he hasn't lost the deadly expertise that makes him such a formidable killing machine. His combat abilities look exaggerated, but incredibly, they are grounded in reality.
People with the skill sets that Jason Bourne displays in the movies do exist, very much so.
Matt Damon, who plays Bourne, went through a rigorous combat training regime with experts who instruct real operatives.
I just kind of approached it from the physical end, where I trained doing all the things that he would have done, so that his bearing and the way he carried himself, because I assume that would be consistent with the way he was when he had his memories.
Bruce Siddle has been instructing elite operatives in the science of lethal combat for more than 15 years. He confirms that Bourne's super-efficient fighting style is just like the real thing.
I was impressed on the Bourne movie by the fact that the leg work is very realistic to what a lot of your elite units get. Everything they do is designed for combat and their mission, so there's no fluff. And that's something that's very singular, unique about elite units and elite operators.
This economy of movement uses the minimum of energy, and it also allows operatives to fight in confined spaces without harming themselves.
They don't use a lot of high-line kicks, they use a lot of lower kicks. He constantly flows as if he's dealing with multiple assailants, whether they're getting fixated on one person in front of him. That's realistic, and he keeps moving. Okay, he's got good balance, and he uses whatever's around him to accomplish the mission.
In real life, covert operatives like Bourne often operate alone and far from any backup. If they are disarmed by an assailant, they must be able to turn everyday objects into weapons.
One of the ones that a lot of people ask about in the Bourne movies is the rolled up newspaper, okay? But what you want to do is you want to roll it up tight. Okay, you want to roll it up tight. You see it in the movie where he starts hitting like this and working, and that's okay. Okay, I mean, it's still got some impact, but the advantage of this really is the distance it gives me. It gives me reach. So when I hit like this is very, very painful. Okay, it's like almost like a ball-peen hammer. I'm bypassing the knife, hitting him right in the throat, taking the knife, dropping my knee on him, and then I'm going to disarm him by hitting him right here in the elbow and slightly twist the wrist.
One element of Bourne's training in the movies has a much more sinister purpose. He undergoes sensory deprivation and waterboarding to break him down psychologically so that he can be programmed as a Treadstone assassin. Incredibly, it's inspired by a regime CIA operatives undergo in real life. It's called SEER training after its key elements: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. Bruce Siddle has witnessed the regime firsthand.
The concept around the SEER program is that to try and develop a simulation of what it's like to be a prisoner in a real-world environment with a hostile nation. What's the models of torture that may occur? What's the psychological abuse going to be like?
The theory behind the program is simple. The more something is experienced, the less stressful it becomes.
The idea of getting an individual to do something under a lot of stress is based solely on having them have a training experience where they did this multiple times before. So it is not a new experience. If something's not new, it's not stressful.
They come and they pick you up. You're blindfolded, bag over your head, taken to a remote location, the bag's taken off your head, stripped buck naked, and put in a room in front of an interrogator. Also in that particular situation, there was waterboarding. Wasn't as extreme, but it certainly gives you the impression that you're going to die unless they stop pouring this water over you.
It's a brutal regime that also includes sleep deprivation, food deprivation, the use of stress positions, and exposure to long periods of hot and cold temperatures.
They do it so well that usually by the second or third day, the candidates that are going through the test actually start believing they are in some type of prison.
While the real-life SEER program prepares operatives for the experience of capture, for Jason Bourne, it's the first step to reprogramming him as an assassin. It sounds like Hollywood fantasy, but even this element of the Bourne story is actually grounded in reality.
Yeah.
CIA doctors did secretly conduct real-life experiments to brainwash people without their consent. And their aim was to create a so-called Manchurian candidate, programmed to kill.
The basic components of the Bourne identity are founded on things that actually happened and actually were operational.
Psychiatrist Colin Ross has spent more than 15 years researching the CIA's mind control experiments.
The basic idea of the Manchurian candidate is that you use a whole variety of different techniques to condition a person, including hypnosis.
A Manchurian candidate is someone who, just like Jason Bourne, has been brainwashed to become a remote-controlled killer. He will carry out any order on command unconsciously when he receives a special code word or other trigger.
You create a new identity inside, and you have some hypnotic access codes, which could be words or visual or tones on the phone, that brings this person forward.
He behaves normally before and after his mission and retains no memory of his actions. Creating a Manchurian candidate like Jason Bourne was the CIA's holy grail during the Cold War. It all started in June 1950, when America joined South Korea to fight against the Communist North. A high number of captured U.S. servicemen were filmed denouncing the United States.
Well, I was beginning to get an idea of how two-faced some people could be. I mean, even the men that were conducting the war weren't even being told the truth about it. My germination took place on the 27th of March, 1952.
The intelligence service could not believe that American servicemen could be disloyal. The only explanation? The Chinese had found a way to brainwash them.
The United States was worried as to whether mind-expanding drugs would represent a real danger to serving officers overseas who had valuable information if they should become captive and then these drugs were used on them.
It was feared that America's enemies were using hypnosis and mind-altering drugs to extract information, and even to program captives to kill. The CIA decided it couldn't fall behind in this quest for a new, devastating weapon.
It's logical to assume that having had it done to us, we would want to figure out what were the properties involved so that we could use it offensively.
The CIA's mind control program was codenamed MK Ultra. It was the brainchild of a high-ranking CIA scientist called Dr. Sidney Gottlieb. Gottlieb was a military psychiatrist and chemist who played a key role in a number of covert black ops that operated below the radar of elected representatives. In 1954, Gottlieb carried out a series of experiments to see if a mind-controlled assassin like Jason Bourne could be created using hypnotism. It gave the CIA their first shocking proof that mind control could work.
This is a file, Hypnotic Experimentation and Research, 10th of February 1954.
A document released under the Freedom of Information Act describes one of the chilling experiments the CIA scientists performed.
It describes an experiment on a young woman who was hypnotized and programmed. In a hypnotic state, she was instructed to fire a gun at another person.
The woman had a fear of firearms, but was able to hold the weapon once hypnotized, and was sent into a room where another woman appeared to be sleeping. The hypnotized subject was instructed to wake the sleeping woman using every method at her disposal. But if the woman refused to wake up, she should shoot and kill her.
She was instructed her rage would be so great that she would not hesitate to kill for failing to awaken. Miss, name whited out, carried out these suggestions to the letter, including firing the unloaded pistol gun at name whited out. She was instructed to go back to sleep and told that when she woke up, she would have no memory of this. And the documents describe her doing exactly that and having full amnesia for what she'd done. Miss, name whited out, was again handed the gun, which she refused in an awakened state to pick up or accept from the operator. She expressed absolute denial that the foregoing sequence had happened.
Further trials revealed that hypnotism didn't work on everyone, and its results were unpredictable. Undeterred in their quest to create a brainwashed assassin like Jason Bourne, CIA scientists turned their attention to a new mind-altering drug.
Will you drink it? You're doing fine, just try to describe it.
Oh, you don't know, you want to give yourself, you want to give yourself as much as you can.
The little-known hallucinogen was called LSD. The first experiments were conducted on paid volunteers, but the CIA was doubtful about the value of the findings because the subjects were aware they had taken the drug. So they ordered a group of CIA employees at their technical support division to spike their co-workers' drinks without their knowledge. Seven months into the LSD testing program, MK Ultra director Sidney Gottlieb took some LSD along to a CIA retreat in Maryland. Also attending was a 43-year-old scientist named Frank Olson, who was conducting top-secret research into biological weapons. After a dinner, a member of the CIA secretly spiked Olson's drink with LSD. A few hours later, the drug kicked in, and events began to spiral out of control. Olson suffered a severe psychotic episode and was taken to see a doctor in New York. The CIA told his family that he had suffered a nervous breakdown. Frank Olson was never told he had been given LSD. And 5 days later, he fell to his death from the 10th floor of a New York hotel. His family didn't know he'd been given LSD until 20 years later.
The way the Olson family found out the true story was by reading the 1975 Rockefeller Commission report on CIA activities. And there's just a couple paragraphs in there telling the story.
An internal CIA investigation criticized Sidney Gottlieb for administering the drug to an unwitting subject, but he was not officially reprimanded. In 1976, the Olson family received $750,000 in compensation and an apology from President Ford. Incredibly, this tragedy did not end the use of LSD on unwitting subjects. In fact, just 1 year later, it was expanded. To find out if the drug could be used for mind control, the CIA decided to test it on their most unusual subjects to date.
Under MKUltra, a man named George White went to the police stations in San Francisco, recruited prostitutes that he found there who were being arrested, and paid them to pick guys up at bars, bring them back to a safe house created by the CIA, have sex with them and slip them LSD, and while they were having sex, the CIA officers were watching through a one-way mirror.
Like hypnotism, LSD was found to be unpredictable. MKUltra did not stop there. The CIA's final experiments to create a remote-controlled assassin like Jason Bourne would be the cruelest, and would use some of society's most vulnerable people as unwitting human guinea pigs. In the Bourne trilogy, Jason Bourne has been brainwashed by his CIA minders to kill on command. Incredible as it seems, for 20 years the CIA did conduct mind control trials to see if it were possible to create an assassin like Bourne. And in the most shocking chapter of their program, real CIA doctors performed experiments on ordinary people without their consent, some of whom would experience the amnesia and tortured nightmares of Jason Bourne. The group the CIA targeted were vulnerable and powerless, patients in mental hospitals.
Psychiatry patients are a good group to experiment on because they're disenfranchised, disempowered, and they're very easy to discredit because you can always say, oh, that's just their mental illness.
Psychiatrist Dr. Colin Ross has spent more than 15 years researching these unauthorized experiments. He believes that Karen Wetmore was one of thousands of unwitting victims of the CIA's MKUltra mind control program. In the early 1970s, doctors admitted Karen, who was suffering from schizophrenia, to a psychiatric ward at Vermont State Hospital. Like Jason Bourne, Karen can remember only disjointed fragments about what happened to her there.
I have a couple of memories, fragments. I don't know how long I'd been there. I was in a seclusion room. I was naked. I remember being in the straitjacket. The pain in my shoulders and arms and neck was excruciating. You couldn't get away from it. And I just remember wondering, what did I possibly have done to be treated like this?
In 1995, a psychologist treating Karen advised her to obtain her medical records to try and fill in the blanks. She was shocked to discover the bizarre treatment she had undergone.
I was absolutely horrified. And the only term that I've ever been able to come up with is psychological rape.
Karen discovered that she had been kept in a straitjacket for 7 months.
It's a very bad feeling to know that there are these portions of my life that are just completely gone.
In an attempt to find answers, Karen began to research the doctors who had been involved in her treatment. The name Dr. Robert W. Hyde kept cropping up on her records. When she dug further, she found documents that linked Hyde to Sidney Gottlieb in the CIA's mind control program.
I found out this man was a top secret employee of the Central Intelligence Agency who conducted the MKUltra projects.
Psychiatrist Dr. Colin Ross has treated many victims of the MKUltra mind control program since the early 1990s. He investigated Karen's case to see if she too had been an unwitting CIA guinea pig. He suspected she might have been selected because she suffered from a multiple personality disorder, a dissociative disorder that creates the illusion of having more than one identity.
Dissociative reaction was a core interest of MKUltra because that's the foundation of the Manchurian Candidate. So when somebody already is dissociative in nature, then they're basically a prototype of a Manchurian Candidate. They're easier to build a full Manchurian Candidate from.
Dr. Ross discovered that Karen Wetmore was given a drug called metrazole, a drug originally used by the Soviets for interrogation and brainwashing. Her medical records also show that she received repeated electric shock treatment. But instead of the advised single shock in any one session, she was given dozens of shocks at a time.
This is the Vermont State Hospital, April 1971, the shock treatment chart. So they gave me 30, 30, and 35 shocks within a 40-second period of time.
Psychiatry literature describes in published papers wiping out people's memories for decades using electric shock. And I've interviewed such people. So these things are absolute facts.
Ross could find no medical reason to explain why Karen Wetmore received such bizarre and unorthodox treatments. He believes that repeated use of electric shocks and their chemical equivalent was an attempt by CIA doctors to erase memory. They believed that if they could perfect the regime of treatments, they could create a brainwashed assassin like Bourne.
I would say with a high level of probability, Karen Wetmore was a subject in some sort of CIA-driven mind control experimentation. The reasons I say that are the drugs that she was given, the electroshock she was given, the different diagnoses she received, the doctors who were involved with her.
Karen has spent more than 12 years trying to prove what was done to her in the hope that she can shed light on this sinister period in the CIA's history and help other victims of the program.
I feel haunted about the possibility that there are people out there that don't know that they were experimented on and that they can't receive the proper care and that they may hate themselves like I hated myself. They may actually kill themselves like I almost killed myself over this.
The CIA was never able to reach its final goal of creating a brainwashed assassin. In 1975, the MKUltra program was brought to a halt with the dramatic revelation of wide-ranging CIA misconduct.
This report should have significant historic importance because it's the first detailed look at how that secret world worked and all of the serious weaknesses within it.
A Senate committee led by Idaho Senator Frank Church exposed the agency's illegal mind control trials. It shocked the world and changed forever the American public's perception of the CIA as benign protectors. But the agency wasn't just trying to create assassins in the lab. It was already hiring them to kill real heads of state.
It was electric.
They knew there would be a high risk of an assassination occurring.
We didn't realize the extent to which CIA may have been empowered to do such a thing.
The Church Committee discovered that the CIA had plotted the assassination of 5 heads of state it deemed to be enemies of U.S. interests, among them Cuban leader Fidel Castro. He had been the subject of hundreds of plots, including the infamous idea of killing him with an exploding cigar. But the most shocking revelations from the hearings would become the Bourne movie's main storyline. In the Bourne Identity's opening scene, we meet Jason Bourne moments after he failed to assassinate an African leader. His programming by Treadstone had malfunctioned, and he had balked at killing a defenseless man. It's a storyline inspired by the real-life assassination plot against Patrice Lumumba, Africa's first democratically elected leader.
This was Patrice Lumumba in June 1960, the premier of the new Congo Republic.
In 1960, Lumumba had been elected leader of the Congo after 52 years of Belgian colonial rule. But it wasn't just Lumumba's nationalist politics that scared the CIA. With Cold War paranoia at its peak, it was his friendship with the Soviets that prompted the secret assassination plot.
The Soviets expected to make friends in Africa and were interested in their minerals, and this was a good battleground to gain the sympathies of a people that had just newly become free.
We believe that the only way to keep the Cold War out of the Congo.
Lumumba was considered a threat. I think the intelligence was skewed to make him look like a communist, but his nationalism, especially how he wanted the Congo to assume control over the vast natural resources, made a lot of Western countries uncomfortable, particularly the United States.
Larry Devlin was the CIA's field officer living in the Congo capital Leopoldsville with his wife and daughter, Maureen. Devlin died in 2008, but not before confiding the details of the assassination plot to his daughter.
The first clue my father had about the plot to assassinate Lumumba actually came to him in a message from Washington, a very cryptic message.
The cable from the CIA's head of clandestine operations informed Devlin that a senior officer would be arriving on September 27th and would identify himself as Joe from Paris. The message told Devlin that Joe would give him an assignment that he must carry out without question. Five days later, Devlin met the man, who he recognized from Washington agency circles. He was Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, the architect of the CIA's mind control program and a brilliant chemist.
Sidney Gottlieb, who was the head of the Technical Services Division at the CIA, had concocted several exotic means to knock off Lumumba without the proverbial bayonet wound to the side or the bullet through the head.
Gottlieb told him that the left-wing Prime Minister Lumumba was an enemy of the U.S., and the CIA had devised a bizarre plot to kill him.
The Sidney Gottlieb told him that he was to assassinate Lumumba, that he, Sidney, had brought a poison for that. It was put in toothpaste, and asked my father if he had anyone who might have access to Patrice Lumumba's private quarters.
Gottlieb claimed that the order came from President Eisenhower himself, and it was critical that Lumumba's illegal assassination could not be traced to the U.S.
My father tried to keep a poker face, didn't want to say anything, but was absolutely shocked because he had never, ever heard of any assassination attempts.
Devlin faced a terrible dilemma: disobey a direct order from the president, an act that could end his career, or carry out an illegal assassination at great personal risk. In the Bourne Identity, assassin Jason Bourne is faced with a terrible dilemma. He's about to kill an African leader when he decides it's wrong and can't continue. It's the same crisis that CIA agent Larry Devlin faced in September 1960, when he received an order to kill the newly elected Prime Minister of the Congo, Patrice Lumumba.
Emotionally, he was incredibly disturbed. He did not believe in assassination. He also realized that if by any chance it were to fail, not only Americans, but all Europeans, there would be a massacre that would be on his conscience and on the U.S. government conscience.
Devlin was a spy, but he was not an assassin. He accepted the poisoned toothpaste, but he had no intention of ever killing Lumumba.
The plan would have been feasible if he had had access to Lumumba's private areas in the house. In point of fact, he had no one, and he was very happy at that point because that gave him time. He was able to stall and gain time by saying, I'm studying the household, I'm studying who might have access, and he just kept stalling.
But with America, Belgium, and opposition parties gunning for Lumumba, the Congo's first democratically elected leader was doomed. 6 months later, Lumumba was seized by his enemies, who paraded him before the media. But his torment was only just beginning.
Lumumba was kidnapped. He was taken to a remote location, bayoneted, he was shot, and then his body was dismembered. So it was a pretty grisly assassination.
Lumumba was executed on January 17, 1961. Information in classified documents that emerged in 2002 suggest that the CIA helped the rebels bring about his downfall. The suspicious death of Lumumba sparked furious scenes in the United Nations and made headlines all over the world.
There's a certain sadness in how my father comes out of this because he really feels that the majority of people have not listened to him. And the majority of people in the press, in Congress, there is always that allegation that he was involved and that it's just being kept a secret.
The Church Committee hearings in 1975 brought the CIA's secret assassination and mind control programs to a halt. But both these sinister activities continue to hold a fascination in political and military circles. Some reports claim that the U.S. military is still researching mind control technology, but little is known about these highly classified programs. One technology believed to be being explored is called transcranial magnetic stimulation and involves targeting different areas of the brain with magnetic fields.
There's published research showing that you can influence somebody's perception, change their mental state, and even implant false memories by manipulating their brain with electromagnetic fields. It's a whole dimension of future mind control.
The events of 9/11 also brought assassination storming back onto the political agenda. In August 2009, it was revealed that the Bush administration had set up an assassination ring to target al-Qaeda members.
We need to remember that our objective here is victory, and that we need to be prepared to do whatever it takes in order to achieve that.
And just as in the Bourne movies, the CIA hid the program from Congress.
After the 9/11, there was a meeting at Camp David. CIA Director George Tenet was there. He came into the meeting with a program all ready to go called the Worldwide Attack Matrix. He said, we will target and assassinate people we know around the world who are involved in terrorism. He got the green light for that.
Jason Bourne creator Robert Ludlum believed that assassination presented a genuine dilemma, wondering whether it might sometimes be the lesser of two evils to assassinate enemies of the state. 30 years later, Bourne identity director Doug Lyman believes the debate is more relevant than ever.
Who wouldn't have wanted them just to figure out a way to assassinate Saddam Hussein, as opposed to finding ourselves in the situation we're in now?
If you were able to stop another Hitler and do it before everything had been done in his name, wouldn't you do it? Yes, but who makes that decision? And how do you know that by removing X, you won't bring on Y, who's just as bad, if not worse, a character?
This dilemma lies at the heart of the Bourne movies and raises the question, what are we prepared to have done in our names?
We don't really want to know about it. Sort of like we don't really want to know where meat comes from. It comes in a nice little saran wrap package. We don't really want to see how they slaughtered that animal. I kind of feel like that's the view that we have of the CIA. Like we're grateful for the meat, just don't tell us how you did it.
The Bourne trilogy was originally inspired by revelations about the CIA's abuse of power, its involvement in secret assassination plots, experiments in mind control, and its willingness to take the law into its own hands. More than 30 years later, the new global threat facing the intelligence services seems certain to provide the filmmakers with a never-ending stream of storylines.